Well, I think that she's doing a good job of laying her case out in terms of the psychological and psychiatric history. I think she did a very good job of using the visuals of the picture of the decedent, Nestor, dressed up like the devil, and she's trying to, you know, somehow passionately portray him as being an evil, sick guy. Whether or not it doesn't look like the jury's really buying it, just based on their body language, but that's hard to read from the studio.
The part about him choking her and using her as a human shield, that says a lot about brutalizing her. I mean, you could just see that that's what he was doing.
Maybe so, maybe not. Maybe that was just part of another, maybe that was his last-ditch effort to get away. Notwithstanding the suicide pact, maybe that was just to kind of, you know, con one other way, thinking, well, they're not going to shoot my girlfriend and co-defendant. This is my only shot.
Not a very sweet guy. Well, we're going to return with more courtroom action in just a moment. First, we're going to go down to Amanda Grove, and she's standing by in the Court TV News Center.
Hello again, I'm Amanda Grove with the latest from the Court TV News Center. Kobe Bryant remains behind closed doors with both attorneys for both sides and the judge as we await the beginning of a preliminary hearing scheduled to begin a half hour ago. It is the resumption of last week's preliminary hearing, which was halted. The Los Angeles Lakers superstar is facing charges of sexual assault, accused of raping a 19-year-old woman working at a lodge where Bryant was staying back on June 30th. Joining us once again from outside the Eagle, Colorado courthouse is our own Beth Karras. Hi, Beth. I wanted to ask you about Kobe's wife. Once again, she did not arrive with him. Is that a surprise?
Well, you know, it really is no surprise, although people are asking some questions about it. You know, she showed up in public with him on July 18th when he had a press conference and he made a public statement. And she was there holding his hand, showing that she is supporting her husband, as difficult as this must be for her. And, you know, whether or not she shows up to trial will probably be a more critical question. But at this point, you know, people know she's stayed with him. They're not getting a divorce. At least nobody knows anything publicly about that. They have made several public appearances together, very much together, since he was arrested since last July. And this is a very difficult topic, obviously, for her to listen to. Her husband has admitted to her that it was adultery, although he says it was not rape. And if she's not here, it doesn't surprise a lot of us.
Beth, last week, the witness was Eagle County Sheriff Detective Doug Winters, who took statements from the alleged victim. What about the bellman who worked with the victim at the resort and was the person that the alleged victim confided in right after the attack? When do we expect he will make an appearance? Not until the trial?
I think that you're right, at the trial. He's not going to testify, at least not for the state, at the preliminary hearing. At least that has not been noted in any papers. The state has said all along that they intend to call Detective Winters and put in what they consider to be enough evidence through the one witness. Hearsay is admissible at a preliminary hearing. The bellman is a critical witness. He is what we refer to as a recent outcry witness. In rape cases, if the alleged victim has told someone close in time to the sexual assault about it, that's called a recent outcry. That is something that is corroborative, indicative of the allegations in the case. He would qualify as a recent outcry witness if believed. She spoke to him beforehand, saying she was going to give Kobe Bryant a private tour, and then shortly after she leaves his room, she's talking to him, presumably telling him what happened. He knew she was upset. He followed her home. He lives only a couple blocks from her here in Eagle. He followed her home, and then he called her again because he was so concerned about her and apparently encouraged her to report this, something that she did do the following day, but not immediately.
Let's talk a little bit about the alleged victim. We know that she has been in the past emotionally fragile, and of course the defense attorneys were very zealous in their pursuit, the emotions of trying to get her previous mental health and physical health records. Tell us a little bit more about her sexual history.
Well, I don't know about her sexual history, but her medical history has been raised. Questions about it have been raised. I don't know that we know for sure how emotional she is, but we do know that the defense attempted to get medical records from 4 different sources, in this case related to her. They succeeded in getting them from one source, and that's the hospital where she went and had the rape kit done. They're, of course, entitled to those records, but they did not succeed for the preliminary hearing in getting records from 3 other institutions, facilities. And it is believed, and it has been reported, that she had 1 or 2 suicide attempts in the months preceding the assault in this case. And whether or not the defense will ever get them remains to be seen. But if indeed it's true that she had taken pills and perhaps had tried to take her life, or was just so distraught and just emotionally fragile at some earlier time in her life, not so long before the allegations in this case, then it may be relevant to what her mindset was at the time. I mean, it's been reported that she said, "I'm going to be famous by the time I'm 21." She's 19 years old now. Is this one of her efforts to become famous by bringing down a famous athlete? Perhaps not. But these are the types of things that the defense is going to explore and raise in front of the jury with as much, latitude as the judge gives them.
Certainly. And Pamela Mackey, Kobe Bryant's attorney, was on the offensive in her cross-examination, sort of along those lines, when she asked the detective if the injuries were consistent with someone who had slept with 3 men in 3 days. Tell us more about that, Beth.
That's right. That was the last question at the preliminary hearing last Thursday before the matter went into a closed session again and then was abruptly adjourned for the week until this morning. And that was a question that she posed to Detective Winters in asking him about all of the injuries that the alleged victim had suffered. And while there was an absence of injury on many parts of her body, the critical part in her genitals, she had 2 1-centimeter lacerations and then a series of pinpoint lacerations around the vagina. That, according to a nurse examiner, is consistent more with forcible as opposed to consensual sex. I suspect that opinion may not ultimately come out in front of a jury, but but asking the question of him of whether or not these injuries could be consistent with having sex with 3 men in 3 days, meaning 2 men before Kobe Bryant, the Saturday and Sunday before. Kobe was a Monday. It holds that very fine line about bringing in the sexual history, where if this were in front of a jury might then start saying, well, is this woman, promiscuous? Is she a little hussy? Was she asking for it? Are we hearing the truth here? And hence, decide in Kobe Bryant's favor, contrary to evidence that may indicate otherwise. So it's a dangerous question. It will probably get litigated at trial. It's not necessarily something that's going to be prohibited if the defense can make a good showing that these injuries could have been caused by someone else. Keep in mind, Kobe Bryant had her blood on him. So if he didn't cause the injuries and he re-injured her, her blood was on his T-shirt, on her underwear, and on the inside of his T-shirt in the front smear marks where it probably rubbed against his genitals. It's her DNA profile, the blood on the inside of the T-shirt. So if he didn't cause the injuries, then he re-injured something that was already there.
All right, Beth Karras.
Unless she was menstruating. I mean, I don't know. Maybe she was menstruating. I don't know.
Beth, thank you so much for that report. Beth is reporting, of course, live from Eagle, Colorado. We are continuing to monitor this continuing development. The parties are still behind closed doors. Stay with Court TV for the latest development in today's hearing, and be sure to tune in at 2:30 Eastern Time for a special half-hour report on the Bryant case, which will be hosted by Lisa Bloom and James Curtis, followed by another special half-hour report at 5:30 Eastern Time, hosted by Nancy Grace. That's all the time we have now. From the Court TV News Center, I'm Amanda Grove. Open Court with Fred Graham will return after this short break.
Painful, nagging backache. When your back hurts, Backaid works. Backaid pills relieve back and joint pain with 1,000 milligrams of maximum strength medicine. Plus, Backaid is aspirin-free, so it's tough on pain yet easy on your stomach. Backaid, it works where it hurts.
Real champions don't do it for the money, or the cameras, or the applause. The only contract they sign is with themselves. We are champions.
Telling him, put your gun down or I'm going to shoot. And she said that a few times. said a few times, and then afterwards, Chino shot her.
The defendant in this case, Paula Gutierrez, describes what she heard Officer Lois Marrero say to her boyfriend, Mr. De Jesus, right before he shot her to death. Welcome back to this expanded edition of Open Court. I'm Fred Graham. De Jesus cannot stand trial for the murder of Officer Marrero because he shot himself to death before police could catch up with him. His girlfriend, Paula Gutierrez, who was with him when he robbed the bank, shot the officer, and then took a man hostage, is standing trial on charges that could land her in prison for the rest of her life. Gutierrez says she never wanted to hurt anyone, and she says she doesn't even know what De Jesus had planned that day, but that she went along with him because she was afraid of him. So will the jury believe that story? Well, one of the main problems that the defense has is that the defense has heard, the jury has heard evidence that just 3 days before this fatal bank robbery, the two of them, Bonnie and Clyde, you might say, robbed a florist shop in a very similar manner. And now in her closing argument to the jury, Gutierrez's lawyer attempts to deal with that in arguing before the jury.
July 3rd. When that day starts, she doesn't know what's going to happen. And here's how it fits into the 6th. She doesn't know what's going to happen. But she knows they're low on money, and he's stressed. And she knows, yes, that tone, that look, yes, that silent threat. That's all he needed with her. She knew she'd better do what he said. So he tells her to get in the car. You know the facts. You heard them. They go to Miss Haddad. But think about what Miss Haddad says. Don't even worry about what Paula Gutierrez says. Think about what Miss Haddad said. The mail did this. The mail asked me for the book. The mail asked me to go to the bathroom. The mail. He was in charge. She said it. What was she doing? What was Paula Gutierrez doing? She's over by the door looking at stuff. Thinking, as she told you, I want to get out of here. What's going on? What's he going to do? She knew he had the gun. What she did in that flower shop was at his direction. Nothing more, nothing less. What did he tell her to do? Get the money out of the purse. That's what she did. She left the credit cards. She left the driver's license. Then he says to her, as they're leaving, how much did you get? She says, I think $45. He's mad. Why didn't you look in the cash register? We know there wasn't a cash register. And she says, you didn't ask me to. That is so telling, ladies and gentlemen. You didn't ask me to. Had he asked her to, sure, she would have done it. She was going to do whatever it took to keep this guy from going off on her and from going off on this poor woman who's now the victim of this madman. Now, how does that hook into July 6th? When she sat here, and before you heard about July 3rd flower shop robbery, she says, I got in the car, I was scared. And you must have been thinking, why is she scared? What's so scary about that? Well, what's so scary about that is that she's already been involved in this on July 3rd. That's why she's scared, because she knows he's up to something and that he's going to make her do something. And what does she do at the bank? She does what he tells her to do. She doesn't ask the customers for any money. She says in a low voice, so low that the tellers who are on the other side of the counter don't hear her. None of those three knew that there was a woman in the bank. She's telling these people, keep your heads down, because she knows what this guy is guilty of. It can do. And so she's trying to keep herself and them safe. And if Mr. Clear wants her to call her a guardian angel about that, that's fine. He can do that.
So let's ask defense lawyer Robert ALTCHILER, how well did she deal with the flower shop?
She dealt with it the only way that she could. She's saying that he's a powder keg. She's moving from situs to situs, from location to location. She surely suspects, knowing he's a dangerous guy, that bad things are going to happen, but she doesn't know the specifics. And I think that's what she's saying. The defendant said she didn't know there was going to be a robbery. What the defense attorney is saying is that, she didn't know the specifics. She suspected something bad was going to happen.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things that resulted from this chain of events that we keep hearing the prosecutor talk about was a series of 911 calls as these events unfold. Listen to it now, and it really is very chilling.
911, what's the emergency?
Yes, sir, it's a bank robbery in progress.
Can you calm down and tell me what you're saying?
Well, two men who ran in the store with masks and a blue bag.
How many?
Two men. again.
Are they still in there?
I have no idea, ma'am. I'm kind of hiding because I'm a little scared.
911, what is your emergency?
This is 1501 South Church Avenue. We just got robbed. This is Bank of America.
Okay, are there any injuries?
No, but he had a gun. Please.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am.
Yes.
I need you to put the seatbelt and come down to me.
Yes.
Are the doors locked?
Yes, we just locked the door.
Okay, there's no injuries and the suspect is gone, right?
Pardon me?
The suspect is gone?
The suspect is gone.
Okay. I need you to tell me, is he black or white?
He was white. He had on a hat. He had on a mask, a blue mask, and he was in a yellow SUV.
911, what's your emergency?
Hi, somebody robbed a bank and came by the house and threw the money out in the road.
Did you pick it up?
We're picking it up right now.
Go ahead. Come and check Cleveland Insurance.
There's an officer down right in front of my house. Hold on. Someone just shot her right in front of me.
Does the officer stop?
Yes, she's laying on the floor. I think she was shot in the head or something.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure there's cops everywhere. She's laying on the floor. I don't even think she's alive. I think she's dead. Oh, my God.
Okay, listen, honey, it's okay? We have other police officers on the way, and we have the ambulance coming.
No, I think she's alive. I think
Okay, he's fine. He's not going to be dead, okay?
she's not even moving. Oh, my God.
What kind of impact do you think that'll have on the jury to hear the actual words of this officer right before she died?
No, it's devastating.
Yeah.
It's devastating. I mean, the only shot you have in a case like this as a defense attorney is making the jury care about your client on some level. And from, seeing pictures to knowing that she bought the gun, to knowing that she was involved in a different robbery, to seeing that, it's next to impossible to ask a human being to care about her.
And the horror of the other woman who called in and said an officer is down. Well, in any event, we're going to take a break and then we'll continue our coverage.